I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad.
Yeah, we've now entered into like the most stereotypical 1984 territory ever. That is utterly Orwellian, which tells me that Donald Trump was told to say that because I don't think that he's read Orwell. But when you stand there and say that Ukraine started the war, that's at least two things, neither of them good. One, as has been noted many times, that's the most stereotypical Russian talking point possible. Donald Trump is standing there and he's in the position of an American president, but that's just Vladimir Putin speaking. That's literally all it is. You can say that I'm a bad guy to acknowledge that he's spreading Russian talking points, but that is what he is doing. It's also utterly insane. But like, I need everybody out there to just like, when you hear something like this, please just don't accept it. I know that there's a lot of crazy stuff going on and it can be very wearing and time passes. But like when they say something that is the exact opposite of the truth, make a mental note of that because they're gonna try to get you to believe insane things. Ukraine was invaded by Russia. We saw it happen. Putin chose to make that decision. He tried to conquer it over a weekend. Now, thankfully, Ukraine fought back. And unfortunately, in the time since, every day of which Vladimir Putin could have decided to just go, just leave. You don't have to be there right now. I read a headline that they were forced to have donkeys deliver their ammunition to their troops. No, they weren't. They are having donkeys deliver their ammunition to their troops, not forced. You could have the donkeys walk towards Moscow and have the soldiers go with them. You could do that. They've chosen not only to initiate this war, but to continue it, devastatingly so for the civilian population of Ukraine and for their own soldiers too, by the way, committing war crimes, using rape as a weapon of war, mass movement of populations. They've been doing all that from the very beginning. And I know that we shouldn't be surprised by anything that Donald Trump says at this point, but it is sickening. It is deeply absurd to see him stand there and say, no, don't believe the evidence of your lying eyes. Ukraine invaded themselves with Russian tanks. That's what actually happened. Now, unfortunately, the backdrop of all this is that he is in charge. If he wants to end the war in Ukraine by just making Ukraine part of Russia, he can and likely will do that. And when he goes to do that, you're gonna find that there aren't as many people on the side of rationality in this conflict as you might think. Here's Harry Enton to break down the numbers.
Holy Toledo, look at this trend line here. US support for Ukraine is too much. Back when the war began, back in February of 2022, it was just 7%. Up like a rocket ship, my goodness. Up now in February of 2025 to 41%.
What about opinions of the Ukrainian president?
Right, obviously, if you would expect changes amongst the public on feelings towards Ukraine, feelings towards Zelensky have changed also dramatically. Look at this. Confident Zelensky will do the right thing when it comes to world affairs. Back in 2022, it was the clear majority, 72% through the floor. Through the floor by 2024, just 48%.
Okay, I'm glad that we have those numbers. I feel like Harry Enton, in his quest to match Steve Kornacki, is jumping ahead of himself a little bit with the language. Off like a rocket, through the floor. I mean, it's at 48%. That's not as high as 72. I'll grant him that. It's still a higher approval rating than Donald Trump has. So let's be clear about that. The numbers are not where I'd want them to be, but they're also not nearly as bad as they would imply. Either that Harry Enton is implying, or definitely that Donald Trump is. Donald Trump claimed that Zelensky is at a 4% approval rating. Maybe he just forgot to type the second digit in that. Maybe he could acknowledge that he's less popular than Zelensky is. And look, if you believe that we're doing too much to support Ukraine, I understand why more people believe that than used to. The war has dragged on for multiple years. We've spent a lot of money. There's fear that Russia just is never going to surrender, no matter how many troops they lose, no matter how much damage it does to their country, because they are ruled by a dictator who doesn't give a damn about such things. If you believe all that, I understand that. I totally understand that. And I might even understand if Donald Trump came in and was honest and said, look, I think it's barbaric what Vladimir Putin chose to do. I think he's committed clear war crimes. My heart aches for the Ukrainian people and for the Russian soldiers needlessly fed into this wood chipper. But at this point, we have to be realistic, and some concessions will be, you could do that sort of thing. And we could agree or disagree with it, but at least it would be honest from his perspective. That's not what we're getting. Instead, he says Ukraine started the war. Oh, and also, if you're concerned about authoritarianism in this conflict, Zelensky is the dictator. He literally said that. Now, I'm not gonna read the entire bleat because it's way too long. All of this is utterly mad. What he says about Vladimir Zelensky, who survived and did for his country 1,000 times more than Donald Trump ever would. Donald Trump wouldn't help us. He couldn't help us get through a soggy paper bag, let alone what Zelensky has survived and done for his country. But he not only attacks him, he says he refuses to have elections as his country is mid-invasion, which, by the way, look, I would love elections, but typically when countries are invaded, you don't see a lot of them for a few years. That's kind of what happens. And he's a dictator. Now, look, he's saying these insane things about Zelensky. Have you ever seen him talk about Vladimir Putin in this way? Zelensky's a dictator? What about Putin? Zelensky should have elections? Should Putin have an election every once in a while? His country isn't being invaded. They could have an actual free and fair election for the first time in decades if they wanted to. And by the way, you know how I know that Vladimir Zelensky is not a dictator? Because right now, Donald Trump isn't humping his leg as hard as he can. If we had definitive footage of Zelensky getting up from a chair and Donald Trump burying his nostrils in the cushion, then yes, I might believe that he's a dictator, but I haven't seen that yet. And so I think that Donald Trump is protesting too much. So there's a lot of madness there, Sharon, and I apologize for the evocative language, but what do you make of this?
I love it when you talk like that. It's brilliant. Listen, it's all full of lies. We get it. You don't like Ukraine and its current duly elected leader, and you find him to be a comedian because he would not do what you wanted him to do with Hunter Biden, okay? And you're holding a grudge and you're not gonna give in, but you are gonna demand some more minerals and treasures from Ukraine just to kind of stay semi-neutral, but you're not really gonna be neutral because you want them to give it all up and allow, well, Putin to just restock and get his army back together so that he could just keep going and storm his way through all of Europe. That is exactly what Donald Trump is doing, and he's doing it with lies. If you want to believe that, believe it. It's the Republicans will. They'll rubber stamp. Are now, what is Marco Rubio again? What's his title now? Because he was part of the club. They just said, oh, you're in. And you were really nice to me about a bathroom break when I was getting ready to bring my daughter to the Senate. So we confirm you. He's horrible too. He's an election denier. And now he's rubber stamping it as well. Marco Rubio. It's a joke. He's still little Marco, okay? This is ridiculous.
Yeah, and by the way, if you're a person out there that's like, you know what, I wish Ukraine wasn't being invaded, I wish it wasn't gonna be conquered, but it's just too much, I want peace. I understand philosophically how you feel. I want it too. I'm not gonna give credit to Donald Trump for getting peace in this case. Anybody could have given Ukraine away to a desperate. That's not difficult to do. But also, I need you to understand, if they do this, you are not getting peace out of this. You might be getting a temporary cessation of hostilities in Ukraine. It'll be invaded in the next year or two after that, and he'll finish the job. And this will be all of the indication Putin needs to know that he can start invading other former Soviet republics, and he will do so. I don't know if it's Finland, I don't know if it's Poland, I don't know which one it's gonna be next, but that is now his sphere of influence. Donald Trump has said you can do whatever the hell you want. It's yours. And that's not even the only war you're gonna get, because that will also be part of the deal where Russia gets its sphere of influence and we do. And we can invade Greenland and we can invade Poland and maybe we make Canada the 51st state. This is a recipe for potentially world war, maybe 2 world wars at the same time, where we conquer one half, they conquer the other half. This is the farthest thing imaginable from peace. When you click the join button and become a tier 2 member, you get access to all of our weekly top 10 lists. What are you waiting for?